Welcome to Grandma's Verdict, and we invite you to watch a video with our new original story. Sarah parked by the gray, massive gates of the city cemetery. She was lucky. She didn't even have to look for a spot. There were hardly any cars. It was hardly surprising in this weather. The wind was icy, the sky overcast. A nasty, cold October rain had been drizzling from the gray clouds since morning. Not the weather for a walk in a cemetery. But Sarah simply couldn't not visit her beloved on such a day. Today marked 40 days since Sarah had become a widow. She still couldn't associate herself with that terrible word. And she couldn't get used to the fact that Michael was no longer there either. Before we continue, please like this video, thank you. Enjoy the story. It all seemed as if her beloved husband was on another business trip. He had been flying and traveling so often all over the country, especially lately. Young, handsome, promising. His career was on the rise, not just rising but soaring. So many plans ahead. And then this. When Sarah received the call that evening to inform her of the terrible news, she at first didn't believe it. She thought they had the wrong number. But the indifferent male voice on the phone was relentless. "A car accident," he had said, giving Michael's details. Then came the black days full of pain and despair. And she still hadn't fully let go. But it had been even harder then. It seemed as if life had stopped. All of Sarah's plans, all her dreams for the future were exclusively connected with Michael. And even though they had seemed to drift apart lately, Sarah knew it wouldn't last long. It was just that Michael had a lot of work piled on him. He was very tired. And on that fateful day, when the accident happened, her beloved had most likely fallen asleep at the wheel. Not surprising with such a schedule. He had fallen asleep and lost control of the car. He shouldn't have been behind the wheel. The world had turned upside down for Sarah. She had no one in her life but her beloved husband. Her mother had died a long time ago. Sarah was barely 5 years old then. The girl hardly remembered her. Sarah was raised by her father, a man stingy with emotions and always busy. In fact, he was no longer in this world either. Women would periodically appear in the house, but none of them stayed for long, much to Sarah's joy. These ladies did not treat the girl with affection and tenderness. Rather, Sarah irritated her stepmothers, interfered with their happiness. Her father loved Sarah. It's a pity he didn't know how to express his feelings properly. The girl understood this later, but when she was a little girl, it seemed to her that her father was completely indifferent to her. The man did not know how to show his emotions, having grown up in a large family where sons and daughters received almost no parental attention. And so he turned out to be such a cold, at first glance, person. And yet he raised and educated his daughter. And how he educated her. Sarah graduated from medical school and became a cardiac surgeon. She chose this profession for a reason. Her mother had died of a heart disease. So Sarah decided to save other people with similar diagnoses in memory of her mother. It must be said that she was really good at it. Sarah loved her job. She was as passionate about her work as her husband, as Michael. In this, they were very similar to each other, which is probably why they did not quarrel about the lack of free time, did not demand attention, understanding that work is an important part of life. Michael. At the memory of him, Sarah's heart ached. Would it always be like this now? Their love story was interesting, like a scene from a movie. At that time, Sarah had just graduated from university and started her first job. Life was in full swing. New knowledge and skills, new acquaintances where she felt young, alive, energetic and happy. Very happy in this whole whirlwind of events. The girl's childhood and youth were spent with books. What boys? All her free time was taken up by cramming. Studying at a medical university is no joke. And now Sarah had a very interesting stage in her life. She started going on dates, visiting clubs and bars, simply because she had free time. And it was great. New sensations and emotions were intoxicating, made her head spin. Sarah realized that she was a beautiful girl. Guys gave her compliments and looked at her in such a way that Sarah felt like a beauty queen. Nothing less. Yes, maybe many go through this stage earlier, but Sarah believed that she had lost nothing. On the contrary, now she had a head on her shoulders and more life experience. So, There was much less chance of getting into a dangerous situation than when you are practically a child. During this most wonderful time in a cozy bar, Sarah met the drummer of a local rock band, Jake. He was incredibly handsome. Tall, strong, athletic, a very brutal, strong-willed chin, light stubble. In combination with all this, a charming smile and dimples on his cheeks looked especially cute. Jake wore black t-shirts that hugged his muscular torso and gray jeans. He had many friends. He smiled dazzlingly, joked wittily. In general, he was incredibly charismatic and attractive. A local star, what can you say? Jake himself approached Sarah to get acquainted. She could not even dream of it. Before that, the young people had exchanged glances several times. This happened when Sarah was staring at him indecently long. He seemed to feel it and would turn around. The girl would immediately get embarrassed, look away, and feel stupid and pathetic. And Jake, he just sat down at her table, waiting for Sarah's friends to go somewhere, and started a conversation, and so easily, so naturally, that Sarah's embarrassment immediately vanished. In short, they started dating. Infrequently, unfortunately. Jake turned out to be very busy. He worked at a local company installing plastic windows. And he also rehearsed a lot, performed, and not only in his hometown, he wrote lyrics and music. Even when Sarah and Jake were alone, someone was constantly calling him, distracting him. This irritated the girl a little, but it also flattered her. What a guy she had, busy, needed by everyone. That's great. Sarah would sometimes look at Jake and couldn't get enough of him. He attracted her like a magnet. It was definitely a chemistry that had not yet been explained by science. As a doctor, Sarah was well aware of this fact. Sometimes the girl would stay the night at Jake's apartment. He was renting a one-room apartment not far from his office. The guy was from another city. His career as a drummer had brought him here. Sarah was waiting for a proposal to move in together. She would have been happy to become the mistress of this apartment, to cook Jake delicious breakfasts and dinners, to take care of him, and most importantly, to fall asleep and wake up in his arms. But the guy was in no hurry. It was understandable. They had only been dating for a couple of months at that point. One day, Jake invited Sarah to a club. It was not a typical date, more like a meeting of a cheerful company of his friends and bandmates. This happened often. Diana was used to sharing her beloved's attention with others. That's just the way Jake was. Sarah carefully prepared for the evening, because she knew that Jake would be pleased if she appeared before his friends as a star, and she understood her beloved's feelings perfectly. Sarah herself was proud when one of her acquaintances met her with such a handsome man. Sarah put on a sundress of weightless, flowing fabric that emphasized the graceful curves of her slender figure. She applied light makeup, emphasizing her eyes, and let her hair down. Shiny chestnut curls fell freely over her shoulders. Looking at herself in the mirror, Sarah was quite pleased with the result. In anticipation of a wonderful evening, the girl called a taxi and went to that same club. Jake and his friends were already there. She noticed them right away. Jake, as usual, was the center of attention, telling something to his friends, actively gesturing with his hands. Everyone was listening attentively and smiling. Sarah knew some of the company, one of Jake's colleagues, the bassist and lead singer of his group. But the other faces were completely unfamiliar to her. It's okay, they'll get to know each other. With a smile, Sarah approached the table. Jake glanced at her and his face changed. It was strange. However, the guy quickly pulled himself together and held out his hand to Sarah as if to say, "Give me 5. "Hey," he said. "What brings you here? Who are you with?" Sarah stared at Jake in amazement. How could this be? Why was he acting as if they were just friends? He himself had invited her here, and now he was surprised at the appearance of his girlfriend. "Hello," the blonde sitting next to Jake smiled. And only then did Sarah notice that Jake was gently hugging this stranger by the waist, and with such a gesture, cozy, habitual, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Another detail did not escape the girl's eyes. A ring. A wedding ring was sparkling on Jake's ring finger. It definitely wasn't there before. And this stranger had the exact same ring on her finger. The puzzle came together instantly, although of course it was hard to comprehend. Sarah was simply breathless with surprise and pain. And the girl whom Jake was hugging as if to spite her, did not take her eyes off her. "Will you sit down?" she asked, already staring too intently at Sarah. She didn't know what to answer. At that moment an unfamiliar guy, short, thin, was walking past and Sarah, without even having time to think about what she was doing, grabbed his hand. Strangely enough, he did not protest and did not even show surprise. He looked at Sarah, at the people sitting at the table, and just stopped, as if he understood everything at first glance. Sarah, clinging to the stranger like a drowning person to a straw, answered, "And I'm here with my boyfriend, with—" The girl hesitated. The name of this young man, of course, she could not know. "Michael." The guy helped her out. What? He was quick on the uptake. Sarah was ready to kiss this stranger for such quick-wittedness. He was literally saving her now from a very uncomfortable situation. "Michael and I are relaxing here. I just noticed you and came over to say hello, to wish you a good evening." Jake understood the rules of the game. Relief flickered on his face. He stood up and shook Michael's hand. The girl with the wedding ring on her finger visibly relaxed. It seemed she was already beginning to suspect something, but Michael, his presence clearly calmed her down. In short, Michael and Sarah soon left that ill-fated table, holding hands like a real couple. Having moved to a safe distance, Sarah turned to the guy and thanked him. "Thank you. You really helped me out. And I'm sorry that you had to act as my boyfriend like that." "Nothing to be sorry for. I even liked it," Michael smiled. He was not as charismatic a handsome man as Jake, but his gray eyes were definitely attractive. They shone with intelligence and kindness. Sarah realized that she could not take her eyes off them. Strange thing. She should be tearing her hair out now because of Jake's deception. He was married, it turns out, judging by the wedding ring, and he had skillfully hidden it from her. Sarah felt like the one and only with him, but she was just the mistress of a married man, one of many mistresses most likely. But with Michael, for some reason, the girl did not feel the anger and despair that she should have been feeling at that moment. Incredibly simple. They started talking. It turned out that Michael had come to the club to pick up a tipsy friend and take him home. He had not planned to stay here. He had to work early tomorrow. "I have to work on weekends. We're developing a very important project right now." "And you?" "I'm sorry for such a question. I of course understood a lot, but not everything. How did you get into such a situation?" "My boyfriend invited me here. We haven't been dating for long. Of course, I thought we had a perfect relationship." Sarah's voice still rang with impending tears and resentment. "He himself invited me here, and then suddenly this. He's sitting there hugging a girl. They both have wedding rings on their fingers. Turns out they're husband and wife. He was deceiving me, it turns out." "It happens," Michael sighed. "The world is full of traitors. I figured as much when I saw that scene. You, by the way, were quick on the uptake, a professional hazard. And it was immediately clear from your eyes that you needed help." "Yes, I didn't want a scandal. A showdown in front of everyone. I understand you very well. It will sound trite, but he is not worthy of a girl like you." This already sounded like a compliment. Sarah was pleased with such words from Michael's lips. He was short, thin, and still gave the impression of a protector. It was calm and easy with him. Sarah realized that she did not want to part with him at all. Michael seemed to have read her thoughts. "You know, it's awkward for me, of course, to say this right away, but I don't want to leave you alone in such a state. And my friend needs to go home urgently. He's already quite drunk. Maybe you'll come with us? I'll take him home and then we'll take a walk talk. I'll understand if you refuse to get into a car with a stranger." Sarah hesitated. To go at night with two strange guys, one of whom was already dead drunk, was, to put it mildly, not a very reasonable act. You could end up on the crime blotter that way. And yet she decided to trust Michael. She did not want to part with him that evening and be left alone with her thoughts and worries about Jake. "You know, I think I'll go. But before I get in the car, I'll take a picture of the license plate and send it to a friend." An excellent decision. Michael was delighted. This precaution did not offend him in the least. Michael had a not-so-new but very well-kept middle-class car. The guy's friend was peacefully dozing in the back seat, and the driver himself was cheerfully chatting with his beautiful passenger. Sarah was smiling. She was already even glad that everything had turned out this way. Michael seemed somehow special. With him, Sarah could be herself and not pretend to be anything, whereas with Jake, she still had to play the role of a bright, uninhibited beauty. After all, Jake had always liked girls like that. By the way, Jake called Sarah just as she was leaving the club with Michael on the way to his friend's house. "Why did you come to the club? Didn't you see my message?" "No, I didn't see anything," Sarah answered honestly. She was shocked by Jake's accusing tone. He had deceived her, and now he was reproaching her for something. Amazing egoism. And how had Sarah not seen this before? "You should check your phone sometimes," Jake chided gently. "And you're just a genius for pulling that off so cleverly. Grabbing that guy by the hand. I really praise you for that. I thought his wife would figure everything out now, but you're smart, you're quick on the uptake." "A professional hazard," Sarah replied with the same phrase that Michael had just answered her with. "Well, cool. Don't worry. His wife is not here for long. I'll see her off to the train tomorrow. I'm sorry it turned out this way. I didn't expect it myself. She just showed up out of the blue. I didn't have a chance to call. I sent her a text message. I thought you'd see everything, you'd understand. You didn't tell me you had a wife. Well, I thought you knew. Everyone knows about it. As moral compensation for this evening, when his wife finally leaves, I'll take you to a restaurant on the roof of a mall. It's hard to book a table there. But I have connections, you know." "No, thank you," Sarah replied decisively. "I have one request for you. Don't call me anymore ever." "What's wrong, Sarah? We were good together." However, Jake's voice did not sound too upset, rather surprised. "How is it? And someone is dumping him, such a handsome and brutal guy? I didn't know you were married. It's disgusting. I'll try to forget you as soon as possible." Sarah pressed the disconnect button. Jake immediately called her again. Sarah did not accept the call. Messages poured in, apologies, requests not to be a fool, not to be offended over trifles. In the end, Sarah added Jake to her blacklist. Her soul felt sticky and disgusting again. It was a good thing Michael was there. He unobtrusively distracted her from her sad thoughts, tried to cheer her up. Michael sent his drunk friend home, and then he and Sarah walked around the beautiful places of the city for a long time, talking, laughing, telling each other about themselves. And by morning, they both had the feeling that they had known each other all their lives. Michael was a young and promising architect. Just like Sarah, he had spent his entire youth with textbooks, otherwise you can't become a top-class specialist. And Michael loved to do everything perfectly. "I can't even imagine a situation where someone looks at my work and says it's a hack job," Michael admitted. "I can't stand sloppiness." Sarah grew up without a mother, and Michael did not know his father. His childhood was spent in near poverty. He saw how his mother tried to earn an extra penny so that her son and daughter would not need anything. He felt very sorry for her. His mother was very tired, she saved on everything. And even then, the boy decided that he would definitely become rich when he grew up. Money became the equivalent of freedom and strength for him. At the same time, Michael always wanted to create something beautiful. From an early age, looking at any building, the boy would involuntarily try to imagine it in an improved, perfected form. And he also made magnificent models from a construction set. His mother, despite her busyness and fatigue, saw the talent in her son and sent him to a young architect's course. It was there that Michael realized that this was his life's work. Even before entering the university, Michael had managed to become a prize winner of competitions and Olympiads in the field of architecture. He was noticed when he was still a teenager, and he was accepted into a prestigious faculty without exams. His achievements were quite enough for enrollment. The talented young man began to work part-time while he was a student, and after receiving his diploma, he got a job in the administration where he still works hard. "But I'm not satisfied with my work. Too many frameworks and restrictions. I wish I could open something of my own," then I would really spread my wings. Sarah looked at Michael and smiled. And for some reason, even then, she had a confidence. Everything would work out for this guy, and she herself would see his success, as she would be by his side. And so it happened. Michael and Sarah, of course, started dating. Each of them felt that they had met a kindred spirit, their other half, as trite as it may sound. The young people looked at life in the same way and agreed on key issues. Even if they argued, they did not offend each other, but listened attentively. Sarah especially liked this. She knew that she could say anything she wanted to her beloved, and he would at least try to understand her. With Michael, Sarah felt as if she were behind a stone wall. He took care of her. It mattered to him whether Sarah was hungry or not, whether she was cold, whether she was tired. The girl had never received so much tenderness and love in her life. Sometimes tears would even well up in her eyes from the realization of this happiness. Michael introduced the girl to his mother. Eleanor warmly welcomed Sarah. They quickly found a common language. Just like her son, Eleanor was a very friendly and sincere person. And when she found out that Sarah had grown up without a mother, she was completely touched. Poor girl, how hard it must have been for you. And there was so much sympathy, so much warmth in Eleanor's eyes that Sarah almost cried. It's worth a lot when someone understands you so well. Michael and Sarah got married. At that time, Michael had already bought his first apartment, albeit a small one, only a 2-bedroom. It needed repairs, and the house was not located in the most prestigious area. But it was their own home, bought with money earned by their own labor. Their first family nest. Sarah felt happy. She enthusiastically began to arrange their life. Michael, of course, also participated in this, but the key decisions were left to Sarah. Her husband recognized his wife's design talent. If you weren't such a wonderful doctor, I would have hired you. We need good designers. 3 years had passed since the wedding. Sarah's father died. It was a heavy blow for the girl. Yes, they rarely had heart-to-heart conversations, maybe never. But her father had always cared for his daughter in his own way. It must have been hard for him to raise a child alone. Her father had protected Sarah, had once gone to school to deal with the boys who were bullying his daughter, had once shielded his little girl from a pack of stray dogs, having seen the scene from the window and run out of the house as he was. And now this person, close and dear, ready to do anything for his daughter, was gone. Completely gone. Sarah cried a lot at that time. She was supported by Michael and his mother, Eleanor. If it weren't for them, the girl herself would not have known how she would have survived this loss. Soon after the tragedy, Sarah and Michael began to seriously think about children. The time was right for this. Sarah had already established herself at work, had gained the necessary experience, had learned everything. Michael began to earn good money, and their age was right. But nothing was working out for the couple. Month after month, Sarah was disappointed. As a doctor, she knew that things don't always happen on the first try. Sometimes you have to wait. But a year passed, and the miracle did not happen. It became obvious that it was time to see a doctor. Sarah underwent all the necessary examinations. The results simply crushed her. The diagnosis sounded like a verdict. It left not a single chance for natural conception. And IVF in her case was not very effective. Being a doctor herself, Sarah understood this perfectly well. But the couple still tried. Sarah decided to undergo this complex and unsafe procedure. All their hopes were only on IVF, but attempt after attempt, and the result was zero. Before all this, Sarah had no idea how much she wanted to become a mother. She had a fascinating job. A lot of interesting things were happening in her life. In the end, Michael was a whole world to her. Sarah felt quite happy. And then suddenly she wanted her own baby so much, warm, gentle, looking like both parents at once. This desire overshadowed everything else. Sarah did not give up. She was looking for new doctors, looking for progressive methods. She went through all the information about her diagnosis that she could find. Painful diagnostic and treatment procedures, endless visits to doctors. Sarah, it's a shame to say, even turned to old women healers very far from the world of medicine. Hope, work, disappointment. This is what Sarah's life now consisted of. Michael felt sorry for his wife. He often told her that it was time to stop. Her whole life had turned into a race for a child. But this was wrong. There are so many important and interesting things in the world besides children. Sarah was angry with her husband. For the first time in her life, he did not understand her. And she stubbornly went towards her goal, sacrificing time, money, and her relationship with her husband. During this difficult period, Sarah was not interested in traveling, meeting with friends, or romantic evenings with her husband. She focused only on the child, so desired and so unattainable. Michael tried to distract her, but in vain. He even signed his wife up for a psychologist. But she didn't go. She also yelled at Michael for not understanding anything. Probably, that's when their alienation began. Michael plunged headlong into his work. Sarah too, only she was saved by it. She calmed down in the end, accepted the hard truth for herself, and even began to think about an adopted baby. True, it took a lot of time for that. Michael was not at all inspired by the idea of a child from an orphanage. Sarah, you're a doctor. You know the power of genes yourself. Who knows what kind of parents this child has? Rarely do babies from good families end up in orphanages. We are happy as we are. We can afford a lot, we can travel. Why do we need extra problems? I can't be a father to a child. To a child from God knows who. But you understand that we have no other chance to become parents. I understand. So what? People live without children. Michael seemed to be speaking completely sincerely. But Sarah had it in her head that he was just being cunning. And in fact, just like she herself dreams of a son or daughter, he was pretending so that Sarah would not feel guilty. But Sarah felt it. She blamed herself for not being able to become a mother and make herself and her husband happy. Yes, there was such a difficult period in her life. But in the end, Sarah still sought psychological help. Not only her husband, but also her friends and colleagues urged her to do so. Gradually, with the help of specialists, Sarah was able to accept reality and find new meanings in life. It became easier. Sarah finally came to her senses, looked around, and found that Michael had become distant, somehow alien, cold. He worked a lot. Projects all over the country, constant business trips, he was almost never at home. Perhaps her husband had plunged headlong into his work precisely because his wife at that moment, although she was physically next to him, was in some world of her own. Sarah now understood that she had behaved like an obsessed person. Michael had supported her, distracted her, invited her to travel. But at that moment, Sarah did not need any of that. Michael had to come to terms with this and look for his own ways to deal with constant stress. For him, his beloved work became such a salvation. Sarah was sure that everything was still possible. Their relationship could become the same. Of course, it would take effort. Sarah was not afraid of difficulties and did not even doubt that she and Michael would overcome this crisis. And it seemed that everything was beginning to improve. Michael was still working, was often away from home, but they began to talk again, to share some experiences, to discuss the news of the day just like before. On the eve of the tragedy, Sarah prepared a surprise for her husband. A tour of the old cities of Europe for two. Visiting ancient castles and museums, romantic walks, where she anticipated a wonderful vacation with her beloved husband. In such an atmosphere, it is simply impossible not to fall in love with each other again. They had once just adored traveling. Michael did not know what awaited him when he went on this last, as it turned out, business trip. His wife had saved the good news until her husband's return, where she was sure that her surprise would definitely please Michael. But it was night. A call at such a time, of course, did not bode well. But Sarah did not expect this either. A strange male voice reported that Michael had been in an accident, almost at the entrance to the city. He was taken to a local regional hospital, and in serious condition. Serious condition. The woman clung to these words. Serious condition means alive. So everything will be fine. Sarah did not remember how she got to the hospital. It was a good thing she had the sense not to get behind the wheel in such a state. She called a taxi. In the hall, next to the administrator's desk, she immediately saw Eleanor, her mother-in-law, Michael's mother, and from her blackened face she understood everything. But still there was hope. How is he? Sarah rushed to her mother-in-law. She raised her eyes full of pain and tears, and shook her head negatively. The unfortunate mother did not have the strength to utter these terrible words. Sarah lost consciousness, just passed out. Reality seemed too harsh to her at that moment. It was easier to leave it, at least for a while. She woke up in a hospital room, on a drip with some potent sedative. Her head was empty and somehow viscous from the medicine, strange sensations, and her body seemed to be numb. Only by lunchtime did the doctor let Sarah go home. She still had so much to do. She had to prepare for Michael's farewell. It just didn't fit in the woman's head. First, Michael himself. How could it be? How could he be gone now? Not anywhere at all. It was impossible. Second, the feeling of total loneliness. It also seemed somehow unreal. Besides Michael, Sarah had no one. Absolutely no one, no parents, no brother or sister, no child. This was frightening and gave everything that was happening a tinge of unreality. By the time she left the hospital, Sarah already knew the details. Eleanor had spoken with the police and doctors. It must be said that she was holding up much better than Sarah. Where did she get the strength? The accident was Michael's fault. He probably fell asleep at the wheel and lost control. The car flew off the road at high speed into a ditch. At that time, a young girl was in the car with Michael. She did not survive either. Her identity was still being established. Most likely, the girl was a random fellow traveler of Michael's, whom he had decided to give a ride to the city out of the goodness of his heart. And this is how it all turned out. By the way, the investigator warned Eleanor and Sarah that there could be problems from this side. The girl's relatives could well demand that a criminal case be opened, despite the fact that the driver had also died. It is possible that some of the relatives of Michael's fellow traveler would decide to demand compensation from the relatives of the culprit, or even try to take revenge on them. Anything can happen. This side of the issue, however, did not bother Sarah at all. It was already hard for her to breathe from the overwhelming grief. She cried, slept, cried again, and completely stopped eating, only occasionally drinking water. Eleanor took over the funeral arrangements. Her eldest daughter, Chloe, came from a distant city. They were together, probably holding on that way, supporting each other. Eleanor did not forget about her daughter-in-law either. She would periodically appear in her apartment, tell her something, look for some of Michael's documents, force Sarah to eat, practically by force, hug her, shake her, once called a doctor to her, where they gave her some injection from which she fell into a deep sleep. But it helped little. When the woman woke up, the harsh reality fell on her with new force, and again it became unbearably painful. Then the farewell itself. There were many people. Michael's friends, relatives, colleagues, partners. Beautiful speeches were made. Words of gratitude and appreciation were spoken. Sarah hardly heard or saw anyone. She could barely stand on her feet. Eleanor, who of course was also having an unbearably hard time, but was apparently a much tougher nut to crack than Sarah, for whom the whole world had collapsed, was keeping her from falling. And then the gray, everyday life began. Sarah went back to work immediately, although her boss had given her a week's leave to pull herself together. But in four walls it was even harder for Sarah. It was better to do something, and in general, loneliness was already crushing. If there were no people around, colleagues, patients, friends, you could go completely mad. At work Sarah held on. But in the evenings she would sob uncontrollably into her pillow, even howl like a wounded she-wolf. Eleanor did not stay in the city. Maybe it would have been easier for them together. Sarah would have felt that there was a person who understood the full depth of her grief. But her daughter took Eleanor to her place to take care of her mother, to look after her. Chloe had invited Sarah too, but she understood that Michael's sister was doing it just out of politeness. In fact, they were almost strangers, and it was unlikely that Chloe's family would like to have a virtual stranger in their house. Eleanor was a different matter. A mother, a mother-in-law, a grandmother, and she would also help the young people with their grandchildren. In short, Sarah stayed at home. Eleanor, however, called her daughter-in-law almost every day and asked about her condition. She was worried. Sometimes their conversations lasted for hours. They talked about Michael, remembered, cried. From these conversations, Sarah's soul temporarily felt lighter. A month passed and then 40 days the memorial service. This time Sarah organized everything. She booked a dining hall, invited people. Eleanor could not come. Blood pressure. She was in the hospital at that moment. But Michael's sister was there with her husband, as well as his many friends, colleagues, and other relatives. Sarah did not know many of them. After the memorial dinner, the guests left and Sarah, instead of going home, decided to visit her husband at the cemetery. Something pulled her there. It was strange because all these days she could not even think about visiting Michael's grave, seeing his photo on the cross. It was beyond her strength. Too scary. But Sarah remembered the place very well. Her feet carried her where she needed to go. From a distance, Sarah noticed a female silhouette at Michael's grave. Nothing surprising. Today was the 40th day. One of the guests, despite the bad weather, decided to visit a loved one. Sarah did not like this very much, because she wanted to be alone with her husband, to say a few words to him, to cry. And how can you do that with a stranger around? Sarah even thought about turning somewhere, wandering around the cemetery, and then when this woman left, visiting her husband. But she had already been noticed. The woman turned her head and looked straight at Sarah. Now it was foolish to hide. Sarah slowly approached the fence. She did not have perfect vision, so she only made out the child sitting in the woman's arms when she was very close. A little girl in a pink jacket with the hood pulled down to her eyebrows. And it was strange. Very strange. Not only did this woman come to the cemetery in such weather, but she also brought a small child with her. Rain, wind, cold. Did she really have no one to leave such a little one with? Sarah, having resigned herself to the fact that she would never be able to become a mother, was painfully sensitive to the topic of babies. It often seemed to her that people did not understand what treasures they had been given, and treated children too frivolously. The woman was not young but strong, obviously still very strong. It was unlikely that she had come with the girl as a mother, more like a grandmother. Her face was somehow familiar. "Hello," Sarah greeted her. What else could she say? "Hello, Sarah," the woman smiled sadly. So she knew her name. However, nothing surprising. You knew my husband? Did I know him? Oh yes. That rascal spent his summer holidays with me for many years in a row. His sister Chloe didn't like the countryside, but Michael just loved to visit us. My name is Anne. I'm Eleanor's cousin, Michael's mother. We were always very close with my sister. I loved her children, well, almost like my own. Michael probably told you about me. Oh, of course, yes, he told me. Sarah smiled. She loved to listen to her husband's stories about his countryside childhood. They were fascinating and funny stories. Sarah was even a little jealous that she had not had such adventures. A forest, a river, a field, a crowd of friends nearby. And Sarah now remembered Anne. They had met at the wedding, and then somehow they never had a chance to meet again. Perhaps Michael's aunt was at the funeral, most likely. But then Sarah did not notice anyone or anything around her. You weren't at the memorial service, were you? No, we didn't make it. The train was late. And it's not that important. The main thing is that we visited Michael here. Sarah looked at the grave again. Many fresh flowers. Apparently, unlike her, people often visited Michael these days. Now they stood in silence, looking at Michael's photograph and each thinking their own thoughts. Even the little one did not break this silence. She sat, hugging Anne's neck and frowning sternly, watched the adults. And the girl, is she your granddaughter? Sarah asked. Anne's face contorted in pain. The question was clearly unpleasant for her. Alice? No, she's not my granddaughter. It's a long story. It's not necessary now. This answer seemed strange to Sarah, but she did not ask any more questions. If a person does not want to talk, it is their right. The rain intensified. The drizzle turned into a full-fledged rain. It was impossible to stay at the cemetery any longer. We have to go, Sarah said, noting with annoyance that she had not even talked to Michael. It's okay, she'll come back here later. Yes, the rain has picked up, and agreed. covering the child as best she could from the cold jets hitting her straight in the face. "Well, goodbye," Sarah nodded to them. "Goodbye, Sarah, take care." Sarah hurried to the gates to the car park. On the go. For some reason, she turned around and saw that Anne, with the baby in her arms, was running to a completely different exit. There was a public transport stop there. Well, not a stop, just a bench in the open air. There was not even a place to hide from the rain. Wasn't seriously going to wait for a bus that runs about once an hour in the pouring cold rain. And with a small child in her arms? Sarah thought that her husband would never have left people in such trouble, and hurried after Anne. "So you don't have a car?" Sarah shouted, trying to overcome the noise of the rain, which was gaining strength. "Where would we get a car from?" And was embarrassed. "We've been using public transport our whole lives. Come with me. You'll get completely soaked and the child will catch a cold. I'll take you where you need to go." "Thank you," and was delighted. And now they were sitting in the warm, dry interior of Sarah's new car. The storm had really broken out. It was pouring from the sky so that the wipers could not cope with the streams of water. "We'll have to wait a bit." Sarah shook her head. "I haven't seen anything like this in a long time. It's really pouring buckets. We can wait it out here," and smiled. "It's warm, dry, light, and the flies don't bite." The girl in her arms stirred and whimpered. Sarah admired the little one. Big gray eyes, long eyelashes, chubby cheeks, just an angel from a postcard. How happy the parents of this miracle must be. "Alice wants to sleep," and said in a guilty tone. "Well, maybe we can put her in the back seat? When the rain stops, you can just move there and take her in your arms." "Yes, a great idea." And managed quickly, rocked Alice a little in her arms, and she fell asleep almost immediately. After that, the woman carefully placed the girl on the back seat. "So, where are you going with the girl?" "I'll give you a ride, it's no trouble for me at all. It's a free day anyway. They gave me a day off from work. By the way, if anything, you can even stay with me." Sarah very much hoped that and would accept this offer. Being alone in four walls was simply unbearable. And here was such a bright, good little baby. And you look at this little one, and a smile immediately appears on your face. "We," and hesitated. "I don't even know where to start." Tears welled up in the woman's eyes. It was very strange. Sarah realized that she had touched on some painful topic for Anne, and she regretted asking her question. "I'm sorry." Sarah felt that she should apologize, although she did not yet understand for what. "No, what are you talking about? What apologies? It's just that the story is so complicated. I didn't want you to know, but it seems that fate itself brought us together. It's no accident that we met and ended up here in the car now." Sarah tensed. Something incomprehensible was happening. "In short, I'll tell you everything," Anne decided. And immediately her face became somehow calmer, more confident. "Sarah, this story, I'm telling you right away, it's not easy," Anne repeated. "And I ask you very much, listen to the end. No matter how unpleasant, painful it is, but listen to the end. Now I'm sure you should know everything." Sarah nodded. Cold shivers ran down her spine in a crowd. Something told her. From this moment on, life will change. For better or for worse, it was not yet known. This was a little scary. And took a deep breath and began her story. She had spent her whole life in the small town of Willow Creek. She was born there, finished school. She went to the nearest city for a few years to study, to get a profession. It seemed that she was going to settle there, like many other young people from Willow Creek. Her parents were all for it. But she was drawn to her small homeland, and did not like the city. Here she constantly felt broken, tired, not like at home. And then the position of a teacher of literature and English opened up at the local school. Anne returned to Willow Creek with a light heart. Here she married a former classmate, Leo, who had shown her signs of attention back in school. They built a house on a new street. Children came one after another. 2 daughters and a son. It was a good time, calm, bright. They raised their children, worked, rested. They also went to Florida almost every summer. The children grew up quickly, but they still left for the city, and not to the nearest one, but to distant New York. The empty family nest was depressing. Anne and Leo literally did not know what to do with themselves. Before, they were somehow always busy with the kids, but now they were suddenly left all alone. And then her younger cousin Lydia asked her to take her younger son Michael for the holidays. Lydia worked all day, she couldn't look after the boy, and gladly agreed. She had always been very close to Lydia. Her sister had helped her with her children, although she was still very young at the time. A teenager, in fact. Lydia had a difficult fate. She had moved to the city, studied, gotten married. Everything seemed to be going well for her. She had children. First Chloe, then almost 8 years later Michael. And then she was suddenly widowed and was left with her children on her hands, completely alone, without the support of relatives and friends, as they were all far away. Of course, she had to help her sister. And it was great that a child would appear in the house again. Leo was also happy about this news. So Michael became a frequent guest at Aunt Anne's house. A good boy, friendly, serious, hardworking. He was always glad to help Anne and Leo. He quickly made friends in Willow Creek, rode bikes with them all summer, went fishing with Leo, splashed in the local lake. By the way, it was Anne who taught her nephew to swim. Years passed, everything changed. Michael grew up. Now he had stopped coming for the holidays. It was understandable. He had friends and all sorts of things to do in the city. He even started working part-time, Lydia said. Anne and Leo missed their nephew. However, he often called and wrote to them, shared his joys and anxieties, told them news about himself, and asked about his uncle and aunt's affairs. It was very pleasant. And then Michael got married, and smiled. To you. My Leo was no longer in this world at that time. I was left all alone. I came to your celebration. It was fun and beautiful. It was immediately obvious that there were strong, real feelings between you. It was gratifying. It seemed that it would always be like this. And knew that Michael and Sarah were dreaming of a baby, but nothing was working out for them. This upset the woman. She knew that Michael would have been a wonderful father, and she felt sorry for the almost unfamiliar Sarah. Every woman dreams of becoming a mother, and was sure of this, and herself already had 4 grandchildren from her 3 children, but they all lived very far away, in New York itself. That's how far the children had flown from their native Willow Creek. They did not take after their mother and father. Their small homeland did not suit them. That was okay. All 3 had achieved success. But Anne hardly knew her grandchildren. They would sometimes send her their photos, and they had only seen each other once in their lives, when Anne finally got around to going to New York. It happened after her husband's loss. She thought then, what if something happens to me? I've never even seen my grandchildren in person. And now Anne was hoping for Michael's children. She wanted to babysit the little ones in her old age. Michael had spent a significant part of his childhood in the countryside, and his memories of the summer months were the most wonderful, and had no doubt her nephew would definitely bring his little ones to visit her, and she would do her best to make the children like it here. But there were no children. Occasionally, Michael would visit his aunt. He was trying to persuade me to move to the city, and shook her head. He said the conditions were better there, the doctors were nearby. And I kept explaining to him that here, the walls and the earth itself help me, and the neighbors around are all familiar. We've been living side by side for 100 years, we're like family already. Michael would periodically visit his aunt, bring her gifts, fix the fence, repair the roof, tighten the door. There was always something to repair in a village house, and in the yard too, a lot required strong male hands. And was very grateful to her nephew. They had developed a very warm and trusting relationship. They talked, discussed everything in the world. Michael worked a lot. He was a sought-after architect. He had already been to many places for work. And Anne was proud of how successful her nephew had become. The elderly woman always had a good sense of Michael. She began to notice that something was wrong in his family life, although he did not say it directly, but from some elusive signs, and realized that Michael was drifting away from his wife. There were no more former feelings for her, as if something had died, and reassured herself. They say that there are all sorts of family crises, Maybe this is temporary for Michael and Sarah. Although, of course, in her life with Leo, and did not remember such periods. They lived in harmony, worked a lot, raised their children. There was no time for hypochondria somehow. Well, and then somehow Michael saw Catherine, and that was it. Catherine lived on the next street. Michael had known her since she was a very young child. When he had just entered the university, Catherine was only 10 years old. A beautiful neighbor girl, a child from a not-so-well-off family. Catherine's parents drank, and noted with sadness how these people were degrading year after year, how their house and garden were falling into disrepair. Of course, this also affected the children. First, Catherine's father died. He drowned while drunk. The girl's mother took to the bottle with renewed energy. Now she had a noble reason. And one day, the heart of the still young woman could not stand it. After another binge, she simply did not wake up. The small children were taken to an orphanage, and Catherine, she was already 18 at that moment. Barely, but still. And so the girl was left all alone at such a young age. And the girl was good. She clearly did not want to follow in the footsteps of her father and mother. Quiet, calm, hardworking, and who knows where she came from. Of course, the neighbors helped the girl. Together, they put the house in order, found her a job at the local farm. In a word, Catherine's life was put on track thanks to caring people. And one day Michael, who had come as usual to visit his aunt, saw her. At that time, Catherine was already a little over 20. Slender, fair-haired, blue-eyed. She seemed to have stepped out of a talented painter's canvas. Many in Willow Creek looked at her, but the girl did not let anyone get too close to her. She was studying by correspondence in the city. She dreamed of building a career first, and then she planned to think about boys. The girl turned out to be with a backbone, to the surprise of all Willow Creek residents. This, with such parents, was just some kind of miracle. A spark immediately flew between them. I felt it, and shook her head bitterly. And Sarah, she literally shrank in her seat. It was very difficult for her to hear this. It turned out that her husband had some kind of his own, completely separate life from her, and in it were strong feelings for a young, beautiful girl. How painful it was. And tried to send her nephew home before trouble happened, but it was too late. Michael, it seemed, had seriously fallen in love with a girl who was almost 10 years younger than him. And Catherine, she usually didn't even look at boys, but here she was also clearly interested in the young man. Michael left. Yes, work was waiting for him, but he quickly returned again. And of course, he didn't come to see his old aunt. Now he had a completely different interest in Willow Creek. In short, a romance began between Catherine and Michael. And it was not some kind of affair. And saw that real strong feelings had arisen between them, and this frightened her. Michael, he was such a good, decent person for me. And then suddenly a young mistress. And what about you, his legal wife? It turns out he was deceiving you? And me too. I also turned out to be a deceiver, because I knew everything and didn't even tell my sister Lydia about it. I probably didn't want to worry her. And I hoped that everything would somehow pass on its own. And I also felt guilty. It was at my place that Michael had met Catherine. And strangely enough, felt sorry for Michael too. He was very worried about this whole situation he was suffering. He was disgusted with such a state of affairs. Michael clearly did not want to deceive his wife, but he could not do anything about it. His feelings were overwhelming. And then Catherine got pregnant. And when she noticed her rounded belly, immediately understood everything. She froze. What would Michael do now? He was still coming to Willow Creek, meeting with Catherine. Sometimes they even went to resorts together. And it wasn't even particularly hidden from the Willow Creek residents. Everyone knew everything, and the corresponding conversations were going on as without it. And now pregnancy. And decided to finally have a heart-to-heart talk with her nephew. She reprimanded him, told him everything she thought about his behavior and the situation in general. I love Catherine and she loves me, the man said. This is a real feeling. And where are they? I probably only have pity left for her, and responsibility for her. We've drifted apart. She's changed a lot. But now I can't leave her, I can't tell her everything. Let everything go on its own for now. Sarah is in a very difficult psychological state. She's worried about not being able to become a mother. So this news, it will just finish her off, you understand? She can't know this now. And what about Catherine? How is she? She understands me, Michael smiled. She really understands like no one else and is not offended at all. I'm telling you, we're on the same wavelength. It's even surprising. When her nephew started talking about Catherine, his face immediately brightened somehow, and was once again convinced that her nephew really loved this girl. I'll tell Sarah later when she's ready, when she gets out of these psychological problems of hers and can perceive everything adequately. And was not sure that this was right, but what could she do? She couldn't interfere in the affairs of the young. Catherine gave birth to Lily in due time. She was a wonderful girl with big eyes, rosy cheeks. She looked like both of her parents at once. She took the best from them, and immediately became attached to the baby and fell in love with her. It was she who told the young and still very inexperienced mother how and what to do with the child. And Catherine was grateful to her for this. Michael now came to Willow Creek almost every day. He was drawn here. He just adored them both, Catherine and Lily. He brought them gifts, played with the child a lot. That time he came to Willow Creek in high spirits and said, staring into space. He announced that you were quite ready to learn the truth, that now you would perceive everything as it should be. And so they were going to go to the city together. Catherine needed to finish some school business, and Michael in general, he intended to tell you everything upon his arrival, and he was worried and happy too. He was happy that this deception would soon be over. The baby was left with Anne. The girl was already a year old. It was difficult for the elderly woman to manage Lily on her own. But Michael promised that they would be back in literally 2 days, and after that their life would change dramatically. Michael dreamed of moving his daughter and Catherine to the city. It seems he had even looked at an apartment for them. Together they discussed the upcoming repairs, even chose the color of the wallpaper in Lily's nursery. And then such a misfortune, and shook her head. When Lydia called me in tears, I didn't believe it at first. I looked at Lily and didn't understand, how could it be? How did it happen that this sweet little thing lost both her parents at once? And of course came to the funeral. First, she had to say goodbye to her nephew. Second, she had to organize a farewell for Catherine. The girl had no relatives, so she was buried with the money that the Willow Creek residents had collected. It was a modest affair. Few people came. Whoever could, came to the city. But still, it was done in a humane way. And was sure that she would raise Lily herself. After all, the baby was her, albeit distant, relative. But the representatives of the guardianship authorities, who came to her old village house, thought otherwise. And the age is not right, and the conditions are not suitable, and sighed. In general, they told me that I shouldn't even dream of keeping the girl. She must grow up in a special institution, period. It was difficult for Anne to realize this. Lily was a beloved and happy child, surrounded by care and attention. How would she grow up in state-run walls? But after spending a few weeks alone with the baby, this time was provided to them by the state. While some documents were being processed for placing the baby in an orphanage, and realized that she still couldn't cope with Lily. Her strength was no longer the same. After all her age, she was a lively girl. She needed constant supervision. The girl needed younger and more energetic parents. And what could I give her? An old grandmother. As for Lydia, the girl's grandmother, I decided not to tell her anything about Lily at all. She was far away, she had just come to her senses, and then this. And they wouldn't have given her the baby either. Because of her advanced age, she was not much younger than me, so why? And so that's the story. Sarah turned in amazement and looked at Lily again. The baby was sleeping sweetly, not even suspecting what passions were flaring up around her. A sweet child. Indeed, she looked a lot like Michael. So beautiful, so serene. Sarah's heart ached at the thought that this little one would soon end up in an orphanage. It was such a stress. First she lost her parents, then everything changed, and no one familiar or dear was around. The decision was made on its own very quickly. Sarah even smiled when this thought came to her head. Lily will stay with me. She is Michael's daughter after all. She is not a stranger to me." In Anne's eyes there was a lack of understanding. "But you know who she is, the daughter of your husband's mistress, in fact. And I know that she has a wonderful father. And Lily's mother was probably also good, since Michael loved her. I myself was to blame for that situation. I distanced myself, forgot about everything but my problems. I was an egoist. Lily will stay with me." Sarah straightened her hair and again looked at herself critically in the mirror. Today was an important day at work for her. The presentation of an award for a successfully performed, very complex operation. Sarah herself still did not understand how she had managed it. The case was almost hopeless. And here was such a wonderful result. "Mommy, you are so beautiful." Lily was sitting right there on the bed, watching her mother get ready. The little one was always fascinated by this. Lily was already 4 years old. She attended kindergarten with pleasure, it must be said. In general, Lily turned out to be a very sociable and cheerful girl. But now Lily was sick. Nothing serious. A common cold. So today Anne would sit with her. The elderly woman had nevertheless moved to the city to be closer to Lily and Sarah. And she helped them out a lot. She often sat with the girl, walked with her, spent a lot of time with the little one, was a loving and caring grandmother, the kind a child needs. And sold her village house and bought a small apartment in a building not far from Sarah's. They were almost neighbors. And so today Anne would spend the day with Lily while Sarah was at work. Lily was lucky in general. She had 2 wonderful grandmothers. Eleanor, Michael's mother, also often came to visit her granddaughter, but she still lived in another city, next to her daughter. Both of Lily's grandmothers assured Sarah in unison that it was time for her to think about her personal life. A lot of time had already passed. A child and a career are good, but a woman's happiness should also be experienced. Sarah had not yet told them about Vincent. It was too early. After all, nothing had been decided yet. So the woman thought. Once it seemed to her that she would never get involved with a man again. First, no one could compare with Michael. Second, she had some kind of distrust of the opposite sex. After all, her husband had deceived her. And for more than 1 year. No, Sarah was not offended at Michael. She understood why it had happened, and besides, she clearly understood the reasons why Michael had been silent about Catherine, and then about Lily. Paradoxically, he had really cared for her. And yet a new relationship seemed to Sarah something completely unnecessary and even fantastic. She was quite happy, she felt like the mother of a wonderful girl. But recently Sarah had met Vincent. He had his own business, a chain of gas stations, and he had donated a decent sum to their hospital. This was enough to purchase expensive diagnostic equipment. Actually, that's how they met. And now Sarah was going on real dates and feeling like a beautiful woman. "Mom, you'll be the most beautiful one there," Lily declared. Sarah turned to her daughter and hugged her. "The last gift from my husband. A beautiful, kind girl, a daughter." The woman tried not to cry so that her mascara wouldn't run. Grief and joy. In her life, they turned out to be so closely intertwined that it's hard to believe. Thank you for listening to the story to the end. If you liked it, please give it a like and write in the comments what you would have done in the main character's place. Stay with us, we have many more similar interesting and life stories.